Haddonfield held its breath. Autumn had come again. Leaves crunched underfoot, their fiery hues mirroring the terror that lurked beneath the town's picturesque facade. The air grew crisp, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke and fear. It was Halloween night, and Michael was home. The Myers house stood at the edge of town, a skeletal monument to evil. Its vacant windows were like empty eyes, staring out over the town with a silent malice. The paint peeled, revealing the rotting wood beneath. The lawn, once carefully manicured, was now overgrown and choked with weeds. The rusted swing set swayed gently in the breeze, a haunting reminder of the children who would never play there again. Everyone in Haddonfield knew the story. 15 years ago, on a stormy Halloween night, young Michael Myers had brutally murdered his sister in that house. He was just a boy, but pure evil dripped from him like blood from a knife. He had been locked away, but evil never truly dies. It finds a way to escape. The old house was a dare, a rite of passage for Haddonfield's youth. It stood at the edge of town, shrouded in mystery and fear, its windows like dark, empty eyes watching over the years of dares and challenges. Every year, whispers circulated about who would be brave enough or foolish enough to step foot on the property. Stories of strange noises, ghostly apparitions, and unexplained events fueled the legend. This year, it was a group of 4 friends. Jake, the athletic one, always pushing the limits. He thrived on adrenaline and the thrill of the unknown. Emily, the popular cheerleader, her bravado masking a growing unease. She was used to being in control, but this was different. Ben, the class clown, trying to hide his fear behind nervous jokes. Humour was his defence mechanism, a way to cope with the fear gnawing at him, and Laurie, the quiet, bookish one, who had a strange feeling in the pit of her stomach. She had read too many stories about haunted places to dismiss the house's sinister reputation. "Come on, Laurie, don't be such a scaredy cat," Jake taunted, his breath forming a white cloud in the chilly air. He was always the first to challenge and the last to back down. He jiggled the handle of the rusty gate. It groaned open with a sound like a scream, sending a shiver down their spines. "See? Nothing to be afraid of," Jake said, trying to sound confident, though even he felt a twinge of doubt. Laurie hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of the house's history pressing down on her. The house seemed to pulsate with an unseen energy, drawing her in like a moth to a flame. It was as if the house was alive, breathing, waiting. "Maybe we should just go back," she whispered, her voice trembling. The stories she had heard echoed in her mind, each one more terrifying than the last. "Don't be ridiculous," Emily scoffed, her voice high with forced confidence. She didn't want to be the one to back out, not in front of her friends. It's just an old house. Besides, what's scarier, staying out here in the dark or seeing what's inside? Emily challenged, trying to mask her own fear with bravado. Ben, his face pale in the moonlight, mumbled, "I think it's pretty scary out here." He glanced around nervously, half expecting something to jump out at them. But his words were lost in the wind, swallowed by the night's eerie silence. The group moved closer to the house, their shadows stretching out behind them like dark omens. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of their decision pressing down on them. As they reached the front door, Jake reached out and turned the handle slowly. The door creaked open, revealing the dark, foreboding interior. They exchanged nervous glances, each one silently questioning if they should proceed. But the dare had been made, and there was no turning back now. The hallway inside was dark, with flickering light casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. With hesitant steps, they crossed the threshold, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The adventure had begun, and there was no telling what awaited them inside. The front door creaked open as if inviting them in. The sound echoed through the empty space, a haunting melody that seemed to beckon them forward. The smell hit them first, a musty, oppressive odour of decay and something faintly metallic. It was as if the house itself was exhaling its last breath, a mixture of rot and rust that made their stomachs churn. It clung to the back of their throats. The air inside was heavy and still, thick with the weight of secrets and sorrow. Every breath felt like inhaling the past, a past that was reluctant to let go. Dust motes danced in the faint moonlight, filtering through cracks in the boarded-up windows. They seemed to move with a life of their own, swirling in patterns that hinted at stories long forgotten. They moved cautiously through the foyer, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Each step was a hesitant venture into the unknown, the floorboards creaking under their weight as if protesting their presence. Cobwebs brushed against their faces like ghostly fingers. The delicate threads clung to their skin, a tactile reminder of the house's long abandonment. The house felt alive, its silence more unnerving than any scream. It was as if the walls themselves were watching, waiting for something to happen. "See? I told you it was going to be lame," Jake said, his voice echoing in the stillness. His bravado seemed out of place, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere. He picked up a dusty porcelain doll that lay discarded on a table, its painted eyes staring vacantly. The doll's lifeless gaze seemed to follow them, adding to the eerie feeling that they were not alone. "Don't touch that!" Laurie cried out, her voice sharp with fear. Her sudden outburst startled the group, breaking the heavy silence. She couldn't explain it, but she felt a sudden surge of dread, as if she were intruding on something sacred and profane. The feeling was almost palpable, a cold shiver that ran down her spine. Jake laughed, the sound harsh and out of place in the stillness. His laughter seemed to mock the house, a challenge to whatever spirits might linger there. He tossed the doll in the air and caught it, its head bobbing precariously. The motion was almost playful, but there was an underlying tension that made the others uneasy. "What are you going to do, little doll? Haunt me?" he taunted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The words hung in the air, a challenge that seemed to reverberate through the house. The doll's head snapped off and fell to the floor with a dull thud. The sound was jarring, a sudden break in the oppressive silence that made them all jump. The laughter died in Jake's throat. He stared at the broken doll, a look of shock and confusion on his face. A chill settled over the group, colder than the autumn air outside. It was as if the house itself had responded to Jake's taunt, a silent warning that they were not welcome. Section 4. Silent Screams. They continued their exploration, each room a snapshot of a life frozen in time. A half-eaten meal sat on the dining room table, the food now shriveled and covered in dust. A rocking chair creaked rhythmically in the living room, though no one was there. Upstairs, the bedrooms lay shrouded in darkness. The air felt heavier here, thick with a palpable sense of dread. Laurie could hear her own heart pounding in her ears. "Did you hear that?" Ben whispered, his eyes wide with fear. A low moan seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, a sound of unspeakable sadness and rage. It was the sound of a soul trapped, unable to find peace. "It's just the wind," Jake said, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. He was starting to feel it too, the oppressive weight of the house pressing down on him, suffocating him with its darkness. They reached the end of the hallway. A single door stood ajar, a sliver of pale moonlight illuminating the darkness beyond. It was the door to Michael's old room. Section 5. The shape in the shadows. Laurie hesitated at the threshold, her hand hovering over the doorknob. The air was thick with tension, every fibre of her being screaming at her to turn and run. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over her, urging her to turn back. Her breath quickened, and she could feel the cold sweat forming on her brow. But something, perhaps morbid curiosity, compelled her forward. She took a tentative step, the floorboards creaking under her weight, each sound amplifying the silence around her. The room was sparsely furnished, the walls bare except for peeling paint and faded cartoon animals. It was as if time had stood still in this place, preserving the remnants of a forgotten past. A single window rattled in its frame, the wind whistling through a crack in the glass. The eerie sound sent shivers down her spine, making her feel even more vulnerable. In the corner, a solitary figure sat hunched in a rocking chair, its back to them. The chair creaked rhythmically, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. "Hello?" Jake called out, his voice echoing in the stillness. The figure didn't move. The silence that followed was deafening, heightening their anxiety. "This is kind of creepy, even for me," Ben muttered, his hand shaking as he reached for Laurie's arm. His usual bravado was nowhere to be found, replaced by genuine fear. Laurie's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the rapid thumping, each beat echoing in her ears like a drum. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, hunted. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak of the house felt like a threat. She took a step back, bumping into Emily. The sudden contact made her jump, her nerves already frayed. "Let's just go," she whispered, her voice tight with terror. The urgency in her tone was unmistakable, a desperate plea to escape. It was too late. The atmosphere had shifted, the air growing colder, more oppressive. The figure in the chair slowly turned. The movement was deliberate, almost mechanical, sending a fresh wave of fear through them. Moonlight illuminated its face, a pale, expressionless mask, the eyes two black voids staring out at them with a cold, unwavering intensity. Michael Myers was home. The realization hit them like a ton of bricks, the true horror of their situation sinking in.